Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the end of week 4 of the 6 weeks to flexible work and life success, the Insight series. This is part of a broader effort to bring leaders, managers, teams, and individuals together to reimagine work and life through this COVID crisis to set us up to not only survive now, but thrive on the other side. I look forward to spending the next 30 or so minutes with you talking about navigating the reset and caring for and coordinating with those we love and live with. I'm Callie Williams-Yost, and before we begin, I'd like to introduce my producer, Lauren. Hey, Lauren.
Everybody, hello.
So with that, let's get started talking about navigating the reset and caring for and coordinating with those we love and live with. Where are we? It's always helpful, I think, to get a sense of where we are in week 4. Oh, actually, no, I want to start with the question. I knew this is what I was going to do first. Okay, so first, I want to ask you this question. What is one action or resource that's helped you care for and or coordinate with those you love and live with during the I called it COVID-10, okay, COVID-19 crisis. I will change that in the final deck. The COVID-19 crisis. So what is an action or a resource that has helped you? I'm going to give you a few seconds and please type that in chat. There's no right answer. I think one of the messages you're going to get from today is that we all need to be helping each other and sharing best practices and things that work for us. So I hope you'll just take a couple seconds and type something in. So I will give you that now, and I will remember to change that to COVID-19 from COVID-10.
We've got a few responses, Callie,
Great.
so that's great. We've got a couple. Keep them coming.
Keep them coming, because I'm going to ask you at the end to share, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So now let's see where we are in week 4. In week 4, we are moving rapidly from just questioning what's next to actually starting to take action as the safe at home mandates really start to be loosened across the country. There is more and more discussion about how are we going to, quote unquote, reopen the economy. Although for those of you who know, who've read my op-ed, I don't like that language because I don't think we've necessarily been closed. But that is what we're talking about, is how do we reopen? And actually powerful voices in business and government are starting to acknowledge that without testing, without contact tracing, and without a treatment, really flexibility in how, when, and where we work is going to be the way through. So as a result, we're starting to grapple with how do we operationalize that? And this is going to be the question we're going to continue to deal with over the coming weeks. But the reason I am doing this session specifically about caring for and coordinating with those we love, those we live and live with, is that we've got to keep this front and center in any conversation we're having about reopening. Because the truth of the matter is, we still have 45 million children who are not in school, and it is increasingly unclear when they are going back. We have, and that doesn't even include the kids who are not in their regular childcare situations, because those childcare, whether that's an individual provider or whether it's a childcare facility, those are not open. They're only open to essential workers. We also aren't even talking about all of the older adults who don't have access to their regular elder care. And of the 51% of US adults who say they are now working remotely, many of those people are coordinating their work and also learning of somebody they're taking care of in the same physical space. So they have to coordinate with everybody else who's living with them, who also is trying to work and live. So this is an important reality to keep front and center, because as we know, that culture of shared leadership between managers, teams, and individuals is really what is going to allow us to leverage the work flexibility, the technology, and the workspaces on and off site in order to get our jobs done, keep our businesses running, manage our lives, and also reboot this economy. But we're not going to be able to do that as fully and effectively as we can if we're not acknowledging all of these personal realities that truly are important to acknowledge and to consider in terms of how we are moving forward and implementing this next stage of this evolving new normal that we are in. So it's important to recognize that everything we've been talking about with the quarantine daily routine is very important. And especially in these first few weeks, a couple months of the crisis response, really trying to just hang on to those priorities that matter, being as intentional as we can about making them happen so that we are our best selves and are continuing to move through the initial sort of crisis response as best as we can. But what's happening now, and that should continue, that's something you should continue and continue to evolve and make your own to adapt it to where you are right now. But what's becoming increasingly clear is that we have officially experienced a reset. And what is a reset? A reset along the continuum of high performance flexibility, the flexibility continuum, a reset is when your realities officially change. When it's not just a small shift here and there informally that's going to allow you to achieve what it is you want to get done. This is really, things have changed. And now I need to reset how my work and life are fitting together. And as we move into this next phase of the crisis management, it's now clear we're not going back to the way things were. We have to reset officially. So how do you do that? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I wrote an article in LinkedIn on March 16th, so almost 2 months ago, where I talked about what do we do? How do we work and take care of, at that point was 32 million children. Now it's 45 million children. And it all still holds true. Keep this reality on the radar. I think in our we used to live in this world and before the crisis where we pretended that work and life were separate. And we've talked about how the COVID crisis has officially destroyed that artificial boundary between work and life, but it still lingers in that we still sort of we give the magical thinking that we can just think about how we reimagine work and not have to think about the life part. But we do. And so just keep these realities that parents are facing, that elder caregivers are facing, and that just people who are cohabitating with other people trying to work and manage their lives in this new reality. Just let's keep it on the radar. And remember to keep checking into your sort of empathy performance balance that you want to keep. In session 3 of the Insight series, I talked about you want to keep being very clear that there needs to be a lot of empathy as much as there is a focus on how are we going to keep moving forward and how are we performing. So always make sure you're maintaining that balance between the two so that you are recognizing this is a true reality for the people in your circle, the managers and teams, your teammates, and each individual that you may be coordinating with on a day-to-day basis. Talk honestly and with each other and be patient. That's the model of shared leadership. That's what it's all about, is let's be honest with each other, let's brainstorm, let's problem solve, because there is a way to make this all work. And we have to keep expecting and embracing imperfect remote workspaces. We talked on Tuesday of this week about leveling up your communication, leveling up your coordination. And there are many people who are feeling more confident, have figured out sort of the best place to work in their home environment. But still, it's still not going to be perfect. And we have to make sure that we're not becoming unrealistic about what we are expecting. And be creative with time and schedules. I am hearing this more and more, where perhaps if you're a parent, as long as you're available and accessible if somebody needs you, there is more wiggle room around perhaps when you are working and when you are doing your priorities. And we have to keep being creative with that, especially since some of the models that are being put forward for opening schools again in the fall is a staggered schedule model, which means parents are going to have to adapt how they're working to that staggered schedule model. So let's start continuing to experiment what it looks like to make sure priorities are clear, and then be flexible about not only where those priorities are being accomplished, but when as well. And finally, be creative about ways to provide direct support. This is something I'm also hearing. Employers saying, how can we actually provide creative supports to parents, to elder caregivers, and help them fit their work and life together in this new reality? Because they're recognizing now this is a formal reset. We're not going back. So now we have to start talking about what this is going to look like going forward. So this is great, and these all apply. But then the question becomes, as an individual, how do I drill down on this? Like, what does this mean for me? How do I actually think through this reset that I have to work through, that I have to actually execute? So I'm going to share with you a tool that I actually went back to recently. So as you can see, since this week, I am back in my regular home office environment. The construction that we started, unfortunately started right before the pandemic really hit in full force, has been completed. So I am back in my home office. But during that period of time, as you know, and I've shared with you, we were in a temporary living space and also a temporary workspace for me that was not optimal, and really was only supposed to be a workspace for one person, me, and my husband was going to be someplace else. It quickly, with the crisis, became a workspace for not only me, my husband, and then my 2 college-age children, who ended up coming back to that space as well. And it was a challenge. I had a major reset that I had to manage through. So what I did is I went back to my book. I went back to the book that I wrote and published 15 years ago, Work Plus Life, because in that book was a great tool that I found was helpful to me. It reminded me, like, I go back to the naturals. This is the tool I go to for the resets. And I'm going to share with you 2 pieces of this tool that really gave me a lot of guidance and provided me a framework to think it through. This is the Work-Life Fit roadmap. This is the whole reset roadmap. And also there's a quick employee checklist, and they're both in my book. You can get Work Plus Life on Amazon still 15 years later. Super proud. It's still in print, and you can buy it. But I'll tell you the 2 areas that I focused on the most as I thought through how to manage my reset, and hopefully it can help you as well. So specifically, when you go through a reset, all of a sudden what happens is what you were doing and your realities no longer match. There is a gap. And you want to compare your reality to that new circumstance to see if they're compatible. And if they're not, then you have to close that gap. And you either do that by trying to change your reality, or you have to change that part of that personal reality, or you have to change your circumstances. So in my case, I went through all of the personal realities that tend to be in that gap or cause that gap when your circumstances change. So for me, personal finances, that was an issue. Obviously, I had to look at that because my business changed, right? As did everybody's business change. I got busier, but clients were it was a new round of clients. So that takes a little more time to figure out how that's going to gear up. And there was a lot of decisions that were put on hold for a period of time. My career and personal expectations. What was I expecting of my career, and what was I expecting of myself? My child and elder care issues, I had my children are in college, but they had a lot of needs that I had not expected to have to deal with that were now part of my reality. And my partner's reality and what he needed to do in order to be able to work in that environment that we now found all of ourselves in. So what I needed to do is now consciously think through, okay, here are my circumstances. These are my realities in these categories. How do I close that gap? I want to compare them for compatibility, but then if there's a gap, how do I close it? Now, for my career and personal expectations, if I wasn't out actually executing a project at the moment, that gave me time. And this is when I decided to do this series. I thought, you know what? I have 20 years of experience. People are been thrown in this deep end. I am going to do this free series twice a week for 30 minutes to just share insights with people to help them navigate through. I have the time, I have the bandwidth. But my normal expectation is it's all perfect before I send something out. I like quality. It means a lot to me. But I knew if I was going to do this quickly and in this crazy, not optimal workspace I was in, I had to lower my expectations and say, you know, it's enough that I am just showing up and doing my best, and people are going to understand. So that's how I closed that gap. In terms of my childcare, and again, they're not babies, but they are still in college. And my older daughter lost her last part of her senior year, and it was really hard for her. And they both had to learn how to do remote learning, which was not easy because they're both science majors. And so their science classes, it was tricky. So we had to work through that. We had to find space dedicated to each one of them. Our Wi-Fi wasn't great, so we had to navigate who was going to be on the Wi-Fi at certain times. So that's how I had to close that gap. And then my partner's reality, same thing. I mean, he had work he had to do. So we had to navigate when, where, and how we were going to do that and continue to negotiate with each other. So I found this part of the framework particularly helpful in helping me navigate my reset. Now, the other piece of it was redefining success. And I've referenced that a little bit already in describing how I closed the gap by comparing for compatibility. But redefining success is very important because when you reset your work-life fit, you have to make sure you are also resetting your definition of success so you feel good about what you are doing. And definitions of success that are particularly important relate to money, prestige, advancement, and caregiving. So you have to look at how you've closed the gaps and what then that means for how you have to then adjust how you're defining success so you feel good about what you're doing. And so for me, I hadn't really had to do a lot of childcare related thinking recently. That wasn't part of my equation, but that now became much more important to me. I put that into my definition of success that in a way that I hadn't before. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, specifically how I did that. But also related to money. Again, there was a pause in the work that I was doing, and I'm doing these sessions for free, and that is great. And I am happy to do it. And my definition of success around this is that I am helping, and that's okay. It really is great. And that means a lot to me. And in terms of prestige and advancement, you know, I was still advancing my business. I was still advancing what I was doing. And you know, at this point, prestige for me, that wasn't really that important. I was just happy to reach anybody. So yay to everybody who's here and yay to everybody who's watched this and I hope has been affected and helped by what I'm trying to do. So again, I didn't have to worry so much about those parts of the definition of success, but for me, it really was as it relates to caregiving, and I will talk about that in a minute. So here are some resources that I wanted to share with you that I have found really helpful in the past and also this past years before, over the years I have found helpful, but then also helpful over the last few weeks. This is a tool that helped me a couple years ago during another reset when my younger daughter got very, very ill. She got a virus. It caused her to, it triggered an autonomic nerve disorder called POTS. And she was practically disabled. There was a period of time where we really weren't sure if she was going to be able to continue to go to school. And I will say, I haven't talked about this experience very much publicly because I wanted her to get through her first year of college. But I'm going to start talking about it more because I think it's relevant for this moment we find ourselves in now. So big reset. I had to essentially put a pause on a lot of my client work for a period of time while we figured out what was wrong with her and got her better. And this tool, it's called Care Maps, and it's by my friend Raj Mehta. He has a company called Atlas of Caregiving. And this tool, it's simple. You can go to his website, you can download it. It helps you map out all the components of your care. And what had happened is my normal tweak it tricks were not working in this situation with my daughter. And I really found when I mapped out what was going on with care, with this care map, it helped me break it all down and figure out where I could I could partner with somebody, I could get some help, what resources I might need. And I think this could be very important for people right now in this situation where your normal care setup is maybe not available. And as we move into this next phase, you have to rebuild that. If you map out your care, I really do find that it is easier to figure out which steps to take and where you need to reach out and what you need to do. So it's Care Maps at Atlas of Caregiving by my friend Raj Mehta, who is great. I urge you to read his blog. And it really, really is a very helpful tool in helping you close that gap, compare for compatibility between your realities and caregiving. The next resource I found helpful right now, most recently during this crisis response period, is a wonderful series by a wonderful academic named Jennifer Petroglari. I never say her name right, and I'm very sorry, Jennifer. She wrote a great book last year called Couples That Work, and she used her framework and her insights to create a terrific video series that's free called Couples That Work at Home, the Survival Series. It's very helpful. And all of her work has to do with how couples can negotiate with each other a win-win. And she really talks honestly about power dynamics and how you communicate with each other. It's a great series. And I also think could be maybe a little bit helpful for people who aren't necessarily with a partner in a living space, but you're just having to navigate with a roommate that you're having to work and manage life in the same environment every day. So this is a great resource and I do recommend it highly. And finally, Redefining Success. I'm going to go back to what I talked about in terms of my definition of success and making the caregiving component of that definition more front and center during the crisis. So my kids came home. I wasn't used to having to be a full-time hands-on parent for a while. And I hadn't expected them to come home in this very unusual and difficult circumstance. And so as I mentioned, my older daughter is a senior and, she lost the last 2-3 months of senior year and she wasn't necessarily going to have a graduation ceremony. And that was tough for her to wrap her brain around what this was and what this meant. And then my younger daughter, who I told you had been very sick in high school, had gone to her freshman year of college and had loved it and was healthy and was able to stay and was having a wonderful time. And then she had to come home. So both of them were a little bit reeling and trying to make sense of what was going on. And not to mention the fact they had to share a room in this really not great living situation where we were all sort of jammed in and working and living. And it was just very disorienting for them. So I found this book and a conversation I had with Stu Friedman on his podcast. So right before the COVID crisis really went into full force, I appeared on Stu Friedman's podcast. I highly recommend it. And we talked about flexibility, but we also talked about his new book, Parents Who Lead, and how you parents can approach parenthood as a leadership exercise, as a opportunity to lead your children to be the best people they can be. And I thought, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to help shepherd them through this experience, to make meaning out of it, to put it in perspective, to help them dig down deep in themselves and rise to the occasion. And I think that happened. I'll have to ask them in a few months from now, but at least how I experienced it, that was a great opportunity for us to talk about what matters, what's really important. And I found Stu's resource, parent, and I should say his co-author, Alyssa Westry, very, very helpful. So that is how I navigated my reset. And before I ask you guys to share what you're doing, I do believe that as we move to this next phase, we have to keep these realities front and center. Parenting, elder care, coordinating with other people in our lives, this is going to be fundamental to implementing any changes or reimagining in how, when, and where we're going to work. And so as long as we keep it front and center, we're going to be able to brainstorm and problem solve around it. It's if we magically pretend it's not there that it's going to become tricky and a problem. And the most important thing is this is not going to last forever. And I think we have to be ready to know that when we come out on the other side, that we're going to want to have managed this as well as we possibly could. So with that, I am going to ask you all, what was one action or resource that helped you care for and coordinate with those you love and live with during the COVID-10 crisis, the COVID-19 crisis? I really would love to hear what it is you did. So Lauren, let's share a couple.
Okay. So we have Elizabeth, who said she used some self-care resources around anxiety management.
Oh, that's great. Good.
And Diana said she's aligning calendars with her husband and
Yes.
scheduling time in advance for us to do something together.
Yes. Good.
Londa said she specifically the use of Microsoft Teams and FaceTime to stay more connected with my team and with my family.
Good.
Elizabeth said I would also say regular exercise in a specific daily schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And Joanne shared video chat platforms have seen my extended family, so seen in quotes, extended family more often than usual. Even my 88-year-old has become Zoom savvy and have reconnected with groups of friends and colleagues via video chat.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Perfect. So again, it's about keeping the reality front and center, that then you can brainstorm how to address it, and knowing that it does affect work and life are one and the same. And so again, my goal today, I was not, I wish I could solve everybody's problem. My goal was to simply give you a way to think it through and to just know that I will be a voice out there saying, this is great, we need to reimagine work, but we also need to reimagine it during this next phase of the crisis, understanding that these personal realities are very real. And together we can brainstorm through them. That's really what it comes down to. All right, so any questions before we end this session for today? Anything else, Lauren?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And let's check in with our friend Rosie before we say goodbye. We really can do this. We are moving into the next phase fast and furiously, and we can be creative. We can make this work so that we are able to reimagine not only how we're opening our businesses, reopening our businesses, but doing it in the safest, healthiest way that gets us not only through the crisis part of the COVID situation, but also sets us up to be even stronger and better on the other side, because I truly believe that is going to be the case. But it's going to require all of us coming together and being creative. So thank you very much for joining me for these insight sessions. I hope you find them helpful. What we're going to do next week is we're week 5. And what we're going to talk about is leadership. We're going to start, I have two wonderful interviews set up for the next 2 weeks. The first is next week is Ken Freeman. He is the recently retired Dean of Boston University's Business School and also the retired CEO of Quest Diagnostics. And we are going to have a conversation about what type of leadership is required in this new evolving normal. He is fascinating, wonderful, wonderful person. So I look forward to that conversation. And then Tuesday, we're going to talk about how to avoid the random and all or nothing traps around flexibility and how, when, and where work is done. People are saying to me, oh, but we are reimagining work. Right now, it's pretty random, okay? And that's fine. But ultimately, we're going to have to put some strategy, process, and structure around this. And that's what's next. And we only are going to do that if we don't fall into the all or nothing traps that I'm seeing too, which is it's all remote. It's not going to be all remote forever. We have to make sure that we're seeing all the possibilities along the continuum based upon the types of jobs we have and where we are in the crisis evolution. So the trick in doing that is you always have to ask, is it strategic? Is it coordinated? And is it intentional? I'm going to talk about what that looks like on Tuesday. And Thursday, we are going to step back and we're going to celebrate success because we are doing it. And I want to share with you some stories that I'm seeing of organizations, of teams, of leaders, of individuals who are being really creative and thinking about that next phase model. And I hope you bring what you're seeing and hearing to that conversation as well. So with that, I thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and thank you.